welcome back. Now the next thing to do is we've got to get the sides cut to length, and then we're going to profile the sides using the steering the bus jig. Now before we can cut them properly to length, I'm just going to trim about 15 millimeters off each end, because at the moment the sides are just too long to fit properly into the mould. So once we can get them fitting close to the edge of the mould, we can mark them precisely where we want to cut them. So let's trim them first. There's a little bit of a gap here, which unfortunately means there's going to be a bit more tension in the side than I'd hoped. It will press into the mould and it will be held in place by the curved end block and curved cawls. But ideally I'd have less tension, but I'm not going to risk putting this back on the iron, because there is a bit of a crack here which I've tried to bolster with super glue, and I don't want to risk putting it back on the iron in case it develops into a proper break. At the moment I think it's mostly the fibres are still connected, but I'm a little bit concerned about this. This was the badly behaved side, if you remember from the first bending video. So it's in the mould, and I think I can mark where to cut the side. In fact, I will do that now. I'm shaking. And we mark the other end. It's a rather awkward way of marking it, but I think that was accurate. This is the straight edge and this is the profiled edge, so it's square to the straight edge. This one's a little easier. If you watched John Hall's video that I linked in the last video, to cut the sides he just pushed them through the bandsaw, pushed them upright through the bandsaw, and used the squareness of the table to ensure that the cut was square. And doing it that way, even if it isn't exactly square, you get two pieces that mate up and the edge is straight across and all works well. I can't do that, my bandsaw isn't big enough, so I've got my ruler clamped on here. I'm going to use a marking knife to mark the cut, and I'm going to use the knife wall technique to do that. It will give me a very good edge, but more importantly it should give me an absolutely straight edge, square edge according to my square. And this is a right-handed marking knife. I also have a left-handed marking knife. I'm now just going to chisel up to that knife mark. Just to create a little groove that I can put the saw in. Bit weird cutting through 2 millimeters of wood this way, but it's giving me a very straight cut. There we go. Be my best ever saw cut. Smooth. Like it. Was anybody thinking steam trains at that point? Ooh. I'm through and it's grabbed the saw. Yeah, I'm through at each end but not in the middle. Come on. There we go. Just a very slight bit of roughness. And ooh, lovely. That is a nice edge. And lovely and straight. But more importantly, square, providing I measure to the square edge, of course. I'm going to do the same thing and measure to the centre line rather than use the side I've just cut to measure, because if I put the other side in, either it's not lined up with the mould or this won't be lined up with the mould because it'll be back. So I'm just going to reference it to the centre line as I did before. It's a really good fit at this end. Well, there's a slight gap here, but not that you'd really notice. Oh, tear away, tear out. It's a very good edge, despite the little tiny bit of tear out, but it hasn't marked the quality of the edge. That is quite a nice square fit, as is that. Before we go on to sand the profile into the sides using the radius dishes and my jig, I just want to explain how the profile works, because this is the back of the guitar and I have already cut the profile into this when I cut my sides to size using the template. This is the back. The front is still straight and in fact will need a profile sanded into it, but a much shallower profile, so hopefully won't need to take too much material off there. But with the back, you will notice that the template is anything but straight. There is a taper on the back. This is just over 10 centimetres here and 9 centimetres here, so there's a 10mm taper across the back. But even so, there's a prominence here and a dip here, and in fact once it's dipped it comes back up here. And the reason it does that is because here, the waist, where the prominence is, it's much closer to the centre of the dome than the horn here, where the dip is. And the horn is, because it's much further away, the horn is much lower. And in fact the waist is closer to the centre than the tail of the guitar, and so the waist is a little bit higher, relatively speaking, given that we've got this taper. So because I'd modelled this all in software, I had predetermined this taper, and so it's already been cut into the back. So the radius dish should really just be confirming this, and we shouldn't have to take much off at all. But if we cut the sides straight, we might have to take off as much as 5mm of material in order to get the profile correct, to get this low point here and the prominence here. And we'd be having to take the material off everywhere but here, because this is the high point. So you'd end up with a guitar, if you'd started with 10 to 9, you'd end up with a guitar probably 5mm shallower than you were anticipating. So I just mentioned that just in case your plans call for cutting the sides straight to begin with. Allow yourself a little bit of working margin for the profiling process. This is just so that the sides don't move at all after I've profiled them and before I glue them. Got some chalk, and I'm just gonna put the chalk around the edge so I can keep track of where I've sanded. It's looking good because it appears that the sanding dish is touching all parts of the guitar. Let's just have a quick look. Yeah, it's got here and here and here and here, but yeah, I think there's not much to do here. Just a little bit more. We haven't touched here. Maybe you can see this, but there's still chalk here and here and here. Yeah, we'll just keep going. Nearly there. That's pretty much it. There's still a little bit at the upper horn. I'm just going to check whether we are actually in contact. It looks like we are, so. Oh, there's still some tiny little bits of chalk. There's a tiny bit there, tiny bit there, tiny bit there, but we are pretty much there. There we go. There's still a slight low spot there, but I'm not worried about that. I'll just re-chalk it just so you can see that all the chalk's being taken away. chalk disappears. Well, apart from a wisp of it here. Voila! It's all lovely and smooth, except for just a tiny little spot here. I think it's level on the inside, just the outside, of course, which is going to get cut away with binding. It's just a little bit rough there. I think the bandsaw probably, I just took a bit more away than I should have done. But I'm not worried about that. I'm certainly not going to take another 0.5 millimetre off the sides just to get that absolutely perfect. I'm quite happy with that, nice and smooth. That's reading just under 90 millimetres. I've taken off maybe 1 millimetre. Just going to lift this up, stick it on blocks temporarily, because I'm just going to lower the sides down to expose the next bit that we're going to do. And doing it this way just keeps everything square within the mould. I've got peg holes that I can keep everything battened down, dowelled down. Because of the taper on the sides, we've got spacers. I've got a spacer under the mould at the back here, but the sides are sitting on the baseboard. Here the spacer is under the mould and the sides. The sides are sitting on the spacer to account for the taper. So we're 15 millimetres proud of the mould all the way around, and we're still square in the mould. So everything's nice and stable. Got my pegs holding everything down, so we're ready to go. This time for the front it's a 28-foot radius, and if all goes well we should be just taking 1 millimetre or 2 off the ends and leaving this mostly untouched in the middle. Let's try it. I want to try and keep this nice and even. You will notice the whole thing's turned round, the horn's now up here. I realised I hadn't maintained the centre position properly. I'd flipped the mould that way. I should have flipped the mould that way to maintain the same centre position as for the back. So we're just going to finish off, put more chalk on. I think we're nearly there. But let's just see how close we are. Remember, I'm only really intending to take material off sort of here and here. The shoulders shouldn't really have much material taken off them at all, or perhaps this point here, the centre. Looks perfect. I'm taking material away all around here and all around here, and I'm leaving just this bit and this bit. So I think that's it. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. The chalk marks end here and here, and that's nicely perpendicular to the centre line. So we've got our angle, our neck angle for the bridge. It's just up a degree or so. I've ended up taking another 1.5 millimetres off at the end here. We're now at 88 millimetres, and we're 100. We've taken in total 2 millimetres off the other end as well, in total, front and back. I'm quite pleased by that. So I've got some nicely profiled, well-behaved sides, and we're ready to glue the blocks in, which will be the next part of the series. I will need some fancy cauls because of my curves and my angles. Got to get some cauls ready. Yeah. So do all the usual things: subscribe, like, share, comment, as you always do. Go check out my Patreon page, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye. I'm about to fade. It seems to be a thing of mine. Bye.